Welcome to season 2 of the FODcast. We had an amazing season with loads of great guests first time round, and we're on to season 2. And this season brings our first guest, and Thomas Stegelmann. Am I getting that right?
That is perfect. Almost German.
Absolutely. I've been practicing that all week. And Thomas, you're currently, if I'm correct, head of e-com at Bugaboo. And
that is correct.
And I think by your own LinkedIn, and in your own words, you're building out kick-ass websites. Is that correct?
That is correct. I've been doing that since the age of 14. So there's over 20 years of having fun doing the things that I like.
The age of 14?
Yes, I was the nerdy kid in school. I was not the football player. I was not the sports jock. I was the guy who was very fascinated with computers. I think like many kids in my age back then. But I discovered the joy of building websites while I was 14. It was just started as a hobby of mine. And then I thought, you know what, let's do something clever and let's turn my hobby into my job, because that is like one piece of recommendation you read everywhere. And it seems to have worked out nicely for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the phrase is if you love what you do, you never do a day's work in your life. It sounds like you follow.
I cannot agree 100% with that. It still feels like work. But it gives you a little bit of a smile while doing it.
So interesting, but interesting for me, it says that you have completed your CrossFit level 1 training. Is that right?
Indeed.
So
I'm also a very passionate CrossFitter.
So you weren't sporty at school, but
nope.
That's changed, I guess, as you've progressed.
It actually changed in university. A friend of mine told me that I should start rowing when I went to university. He went to the same university, and they're well known for rowing. And I'm a big German tall person. And this is where I discovered my passion for competitive sports, especially competitive team sports. I was rowing in an 8, and it is a very fascinating sport, especially later on if you turn to being a manager, because suddenly you realize how many things that are similar. You know, if you need to get 8 guys in a boat and you have a little girl steering the boat and then you have the coach on the side, there's a lot of group dynamics happening. And I find that fascinating how that has translated to my management style. I still love to, I'm every day thinking about this period and those lessons I've learned here and see how I can apply them in my day-to-day job.
Okay, well, that's interesting. It's certainly interesting that you've moved into that CrossFit field. Something James, who is the other director, and myself are massively into. Certainly, from my point of view, over the course of the pandemic, it helped keep me sane, having regular exercise in the morning, something to focus on, to stop me going a bit crazy while we couldn't go anywhere.
And I also think, it also somehow translates in the digital space, because like one of the things about CrossFit is like, okay, it needs to be comparable. It needs to be, you need to be able to repeat it, and you need to be able to compare it. That's one of the statements that I always put out when you're competing on CrossFit. And very often when I'm thinking about some of the discussions we are having in the digital space, I'm like, well, can you repeat this? Is this observable? Can you measure it? The same kind of mantra somehow sneaks into my way of thinking at work as well.
I've never thought about it like that, drawing those comparisons, but I think it makes sense. It does make sense. So obviously your role at Bugaboo at the moment, Director of Global eCommerce and Integrations, pretty senior role, pretty serious work you guys are doing there. And we'll talk more about that as we go through, but always good to get a slightly lighter view on how things have progressed for you. Are there any interesting or funny elements to the work you've been doing at Bugaboo that have happened over the course of your time there?
I think Bugaboo is a super, super interesting company, especially for people like myself who come from the fashion background. If you think about Bugaboo, it's a company that's 20 years old. It's a brand, it's almost like a fashion statement. You buy Bugaboo because it looks beautiful, it's of great quality. But the big difference to fashion is that you only sell the product once to a parent. There's no second stroller you're selling them. There's no opportunity to send them a reminder email like, oh, why, time to refresh your stroller wardrobe. And it is super interesting to look at this industry because you feel like, hey, there's so many elements of fashion, the way how people think about the product that are similar. Yet again, it is a completely different customer journey. And if you think about it, the journey is pretty predictable. I mean, in the first trimester, at some point, well, shortly before the first trimester, at some point, you obviously already have discussions with your partner, most likely about having kids. So you mentally know, hey, at some point is going to happen. And at some point, your partner is going to drop the news on you. By the way, we are pregnant. From that moment onwards, instead of deciding whether you have pizza or pasta for dinner, suddenly you're having life and death decisions. What kind of crib do I need? What kind of food do I need to do? What is the clothing? Is it too warm? Is it too hot? And also, what kind of stroller do I need to buy? And if you think about your first kid, it has, you spend on average about 5,000 pounds on your first kid. If you need to spend 1,000 pounds on the stroller, that is a big line item on the first kid. So you want to make the right choice. And then if you think about it, the first trimester, you're not going to do a lot of research yet because you're still nervous. You don't know yet, is everything going to be safe? Second trimester comes in. And suddenly you're overwhelmed with things that you have no idea about. And because we're all no experts. I mean, you somehow are rushed into it. And every day you're bombarded with new information. And nobody's a stroller expert. You all need to learn this from scratch. And towards the last trimester, it really comes down to the purchase decision, where you really need to make up your mind. Like, holy shit, I spent the last 3 months researching, but now do I buy it online? Do I buy it offline? And it's super fascinating to be in this kind of space. It feels to me more like the car industry or electronics, where you sell, one item and you keep it for multiple years. That's how the industry feels to me.
Yeah, I was going to draw a comparison with cars, and from my own experience, when it came to the pram or stroller, whatever you want to call it, I stayed completely out of it. I honestly started to have a look, and I realized how complicated it actually was to decide. So I kind of just passed that on. And I said to my wife, I think it's best that you pick up on this one. But from the comparing it to other sectors, it does seem like the car where it's a kind of not a regular purchase, right? And you might get another one if you have another child, or you might upgrade your car in 4 or 5 years. But does that mean, in theory, you could have, like an Audi or BMW, a used stroller market where then Bugaboo might actually be able to buy back used strollers and then sell them at discounted prices? Do you think that kind of model would work?
We are looking at various of those business models currently. So we are looking at leasing. We started to do more just this year, a little bit of refurbished on the business on our website to just test the waters. On that side, when you look at the stroller industry, it's quite a fragmented industry. So you tend to have local players, and Bugaboo was one of the few global international brands in the industry. But if you go to Germany, you will find different brands, and in the UK than in the US. So you see that there's still some consolidation needs to happen. Also in terms of innovation, because it's so fragmented, it is not that there's just new business models coming up every day. The entire industry still needs to evolve a little. And I would argue we are potentially, in terms of digital and business models, a few years behind the fashion industry. And it's now time to catch up. But we are looking into leasing, into renting, into refurbished business, because we believe there's a massive market out there that we still need to discover how to handle it. And so far, the first experience have been very positive. very, very nice feedback we received. Consumers are buying into some of those ideas. But the next question is obviously, okay, how are we going to scale this up? What is the next phase going to look like?
Okay, because Bugaboo's the premium end. There are like every product, there's the cheaper end, there's the more premium, and Bugaboo's up there with the premium. So it's not going to lose huge amounts of value over the course of 12 to 18 months where it gets most of its use.
Absolutely. The products are made for last, like they're specifically designed to last. They're not, this is not like some computer hardware where you have the feeling after 2 years it just is falling apart and you need to buy a new one. If you look at the engineering into the testing, into the making of our products, Bugaboo has its own factory in China. And I've seen videos about the testing that they need to do. Like, for example, those wheels, they're literally being tested to be driven from China back to Amsterdam. That is the distance that they let them roll in the factory, just to make sure that they work perfectly. And they need to work in every kind of weather. So if you think about weather in Spain, is very different than weather in Scandinavia. How do they deal with snow? How do they deal with heat? The fabrics are tested in and out, because obviously your baby is lying in the stroller, in the pram. So you really want to make sure that the fabrics are really top notch, that there's no chemicals in there that are of any concern. So we spend a lot of time really making sure that the product is great. And you do see this in our industry. If you go to eBay or any other secondhand marketplace, you see tons and tons of strollers, because as a consumer, you're not, yes, you're spending £1,000 on the product, but you also know that you can sell on the product in a few years, still on to a new owner, to a new parent that is, has a little bit less money in their pocket, and they feel comfortable buying a second-hand store because it's still a great product.
Yeah. Well, how does that the Bugaboo product sit with e-commerce? Because the conversations I've had over the course of the last 2 or 3 years with clients or on the podcast, in my view, we're never going to lose the high street in its entirety, because there are just some things that you want to be able to go and see and use and touch and feel. And for me, they're things like beds or sofas. They're the obvious ones. And that's going to mean we're always going to need somewhere to go. For me, a pram or a stroller is on the borderline. And how does that then fit with the e-commerce strategy for Bugaboo? If it's still not one of those things that you have to go and see, how does that affect the strategy for you guys?
So I think there's 3 questions that the consumer wants to have answered. The first one is, which brand should I go for? Should I buy Bugaboo, or should I buy a competitor from us? The second question is, which of our products should I buy? We have different prams/strollers for different purposes. There's a city one, there's a twin one, there's a comfort one, as an example. And the third question is, on which channel should I buy it? Should I buy it online or offline? And if you think about this very long consumer journey, where we know it is approximately 3 months, so you're doing research for 3 months, and of course you will go online, but of course you will also go offline during that research period, because you are going to go to a few brands and you're going to figure out, well, do I like this brand more than the other brand? And you're also going to spend time comparing the different products. And that is something you, for example, can much easier do potentially on the website of a brand than doing that in store. And then the third question is also, okay, where do I buy it? Do I find the right product online or offline? And if we speak about e-commerce, I stole this phrase shamelessly from Adidas when I worked at Adidas. One of my colleagues came up with a 98% story, because back in the days, the conversion rate at Adidas was 2%. And obviously, as an e-commerce manager, you're always being measured on those 2%. But the big question we always ask ourselves, what about the other 98%? What are those people doing? How are we influencing their decision-making? Because we do know that people go online to do their research. And it's just a little bit difficult to measure when they go to a retailer offline and buy the product or you don't have the data points later on to stitch those two things together. So we have done some exercises in order to better understand what is the role in each of those different stages. So for example, one of the things we've done an analysis on product registrations. As a consumer, you can register your product, whether you bought it online or offline, afterwards on our website, and you get an extra warranty. And we can link this data back to your browsing behavior. So we have seen, for example, that a huge share of people went to the website, left the website, bought it offline, came back to the website to register the product. And ta-da, we were able to link those two data points. We are also looking into creating unique selling points for Bugaboo.com. So we do know that a lot of parents want indeed to trial the product. And when they're already in the store, of course, the sales staff in the store will try to sell the product. And we are looking right now into, for example, online exclusives for Bugaboo.com, unique designs, unique colors that are only available on Bugaboo.com to give the consumer a reason that, yes, they have trialed it offline, they went to a store to test it, they've been talking to their friends and to their family members, and they made their decision, yes, Bugaboo is the brand I want to have. Maybe the Fox is the store I want to have. Oh, but that unique color or that combination is only available on Bugaboo.com. Hence, I will make the purchase decision on Bugaboo.com.
Okay, that's interesting. I always wondered why you had to then register to get the warranty, because why wouldn't you have the warranty? But that makes a lot of sense now, to allow you to then work out backwards how that cycle has been worked out by the consumer and how they've got to the end point of buying the product. Okay. And
it obviously helps us just to better understand the consumer journey. In the very end, we need to figure out, okay, how is the consumer actually behaving and what are they doing and where we want to invest our money. And if, especially these days, if you think about privacy laws, cookie statements, ad blockers, some consumer journeys that used to be very visible are now less and less visible because people move between different browsers, and some browsers have ad blockers and they block your Google Analytics around it. So it feels to me it becomes more and more difficult to stitch that journey across every different touch point. So for us, product registration is just a great insight because it just tells us a little bit, okay, that is actually happening with the consumer, and the investment we made maybe on Bugaboo.com. Yes, it didn't pay out in terms of revenue on Bugaboo.com, but we saw maybe later on it coming through via the offline world in terms of product registration.
And what does that mean for physical space for Bugaboo, and what percentage of your investment is going to be on physical stores where you can interact with the product and have a customer experience against Bugaboo.com?
Yeah, so overall the stroller industry is still an offline industry. Coming back to your point, as a parent, it's a product that you need to see for yourself. Because again, if you look at the consumer journey, you start with zero knowledge, and you need to first acquire the knowledge that helps you to judge whether the product and the brand is the right brand for you or not. And if you look at the quality of store stuff, you would be blown away how good some of them are in selling the product. So training is key. We have an online academy, for example. So if you would be working at a brand, at one of our retailer partners, you have access to the online learning academy. You see all the videos that explain you every small detail about the product, all the unique features, how it's being made, the quality, the new features, etc. So by the time that you're standing in front of a parent, you try to sell a product, what makes the product great, what makes us different from the competition. And that is in the consumer journey key. If you think about POS material, flyers and store, this is not how parents operate in that phase of their pregnancy. They want to talk to people, they want to hear it from people. Having said that, we have invested heavily in the product presentation on Bugaboo.com. So when I joined two years ago, I actually worked in our own Bugaboo store in Berlin for a day because I wanted to hear from the store staff how to sell the product.
Okay.
How do parents come in?
Yeah.
And then I looked at the website as a comparison. I was like, holy shit, we are like miles away from being able to answer the questions that a potential parent might have. And I'm not surprised that a lot of parents would come into the store to answer that. So we have, over the last 2 years, we've spent a lot of money in improving our digital experience, explaining how the product works, explain the unique features, doing some user testing on it as well to get a better impression. And we will continue invest into the digital experience, just because we know that one way or another, every parent at some point will end up on bugaboo.com to do their research. And we want to make sure that at this point of time, that we have the best product presentation in the industry, that we gather insights about how the consumer is using the website, so that we can then further on tailor the marketing more towards your needs. We're investing into Consumer 360, so better personalization of the website and the email and the social media content, for example, because the idea is when you would go to the website and you would, for example, interact more with content on sustainability, that we would then later on understand, okay, Tim is, he's sensitive towards sustainability. It's content that he wants to read through, but we also know that you haven't maybe yet read the content on safety. We also know from our customer research that safety is, surprise, another big factor of that. So next time you would come to the website, we want to make sure that you read something about safety. That is how we want to start to tailor the experience really towards your needs and your behavior on a one-by-one basis.
And that is, like you say, becoming a bit harder for you guys because of the restrictions in cookies and analytics and tracking. It's making that job a bit harder.
Exactly. And I always compare, when I go to Amazon, I look at the Amazon homepage, where I would argue Amazon knows like every single purchase I made with them for multiple years. Like they should have a good understanding who I am and what I find interesting. Yet when I look at the homepage, I'm always surprised how badly it is optimized towards me, where I'm like, you see product recommendation. I'm like, yeah, I clicked once on this product by accident, and yet you continue to bombard me with something. Or I bought a new computer mouse just recently, and I'm still seeing advertising for for new computer mouse. I'm like, you guys know that I just purchased that. Why do you continue to advertise it to me? Like, I didn't return it. You should know that decision is now done, and I've done the purchase. So start advertising maybe a new keyboard or something like that.
Yeah. I've never really thought about that, but you are right, because the same for me. They know my purchase history for 15 years, I would imagine. And you are absolutely right. When I reflect on what I see on that homepage, barely is there anything that grabs my attention or looks relevant. And they also tend to push a lot of their own products rather than stuff that you actually need. So maybe it's a wasted opportunity. We should mention that to them. I've heard they're not doing very well.
I was always going to say I should be arguing with them, because they're doing obviously things correct, but it's they might have. I would argue similar to us. The majority of the traffic is not coming via the homepage. The majority of traffic is going to land directly on product detail pages. So I'm pretty sure the homepage is less relevant. We're having exactly the same discussion at Bugaboo, where I'm also saying, guys, don't worry about the homepage. You can put whatever message you want on the homepage. It's not going to make a difference. The majority of the traffic is landing directly on product detail pages, because a lot of consumers, they already have an idea of what they're looking for. So they search for Bugaboo Fox, they search for Bugaboo Donkey. And I was like, don't worry about the homepage. Make sure that you tailor the experience on the product detail page based on the information that you have. On the homepage, we can make our life a lot easier.
Yeah. So with Bugaboo, I think it's 25 sites migrated onto SFCC. Is that still going?
Correct. That is still. That is still. We have been thinking about opening more markets, but obviously last year we had slightly different priorities with COVID-19 hitting us full throttle. But we just picked up a discussion, I think about 2 months ago, whether we want to open a few more markets.
Okay, this is a big role for you, senior position, and the after what looks like 20 years working your way up in that sector, and as you said, starting at the age of 14, it'd be good to kind of understand a bit more about how you got there, because we can see where you are right now. And you're doing some great stuff with Bugaboo, some large enterprise scale SFC integrations. But how did you get to this point that you're at now? And what were some of the key things that you did along the way?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this was not planned at all. I mean, it's somehow I just followed the path and I somehow ended up where I was. But there's a sentence recently that I somehow resonated well with me. Somebody, and it was among the lines of, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And there were a few things that I have randomly prepared for, not knowing that there were opportunities coming along. So for me, it started that, again, at the age of 14, I started to learn how to program because I was interested in how to build websites. And I can't tell you really what was driving this. Like me and my buddies, we were having LAN parties, playing computer games next to each other. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if there would be like a website where you could find information and download some of the games that we were playing and that kind of stuff. So somehow I started with Microsoft Word. And from there, then, okay, that looked a little bit shit. So how can you translate this to proper HTML? And then along the way, I also picked up some PHP and MySQL. And I just realized that, as a teenager, you can earn a lot of more money building websites than serving food in a restaurant. And that was how I spent my being a teenager. I was building websites, some for companies in my hometown, some on my own. I hacked a few websites as well because I was interested also in like, how does all of that work, and had a blast. And
so what year was that roughly? Was that 2002, 4?
So, right. I was born in 84, so 1998.
Right. So you're still dealing with dial-up, basically dial-up internet.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And we had like a 10 megabit network at home, and Counter-Strike 1 was just being released. I remember that my favorite search engine was Alta Vista because Google was not yet around in Europe. Yeah. Netscape was my browser. I was so excited about Netscape. It was a very different time to grow up. And I mean, if you think about, like, I remember doing search engine optimization for Yahoo Alta Vista, not for Google, because Google was not yet a thing. I was doing web analytics with server-side web analytics. I mean, I feel this might be coming back due to data privacy, that people are focusing more on server-side analytics again. But I was also like, wow, that's a long time ago, where you needed to read the log files of your Apache web server and this kind of stuff. Very different.
Absolutely,
very different period.
You realized that there was money to be made from building these websites quite early on. But how did you then transition that? Because it was a bit later that e-com and online sales really took off. So how did you make that transition?
Exactly. So I was never the actual coding and building of websites. That was just necessary for the stuff that really interested me, because I found much more interesting this concept of, I have an idea and I want to see where that works out. And therefore I needed to learn how to program. So I was always much more interested in the business side of things. And I studied international business with a focus on finance. And the reason is just because I knew that if you want to start, a business, you need to understand the numbers in the very end. I mean, being a great developer is all good and fun, but I was much more on the entrepreneurial side of things interested than on the coding side of things. And did internships in venture capital, investment banking, and consulting. So went completely into a different track. And the one thing that always happened is that everything always came back to building websites. So I was, in university, I was part of the rowing club, and we needed a system how the novices could book their training sessions with us. And I was just sitting there, like, well, I know how to build a website. I can build a booking system. And, people were blown away. They were like, holy shit, you can literally just go on there and you click sign up, and then you'll sign up for it. And some of the other internships, people were like, oh, we need a new website. And I was just sitting there with like, hey guys, I'm just the intern, but I do know how to build websites. So I realized during this period where I thought, oh, finance is the way I want to go, I actually realized, actually this connection between the technical side of things and the business side of things, I'm really good in this stuff. And then I started to work for Red Bull, where I was exactly in the middle. So that was a big project at Red Bull where they built a business planning application. And my job was basically to translate between all the different HQ functions and the agency that needed to build the application. Had a blast with that. And then by coincidence, a friend of mine introduced me to an opportunity at Adidas. And that is now 10 years ago here in Amsterdam, where Adidas started to build up their e-commerce department. And I read through it. I was like, this is an awesome opportunity. They are starting a department from scratch. They have massive ambitions to grow this. I love the strategy. It's a big brand. And obviously for Adidas, this is more an executional exercise than an entrepreneurial exercise. Like Adidas, they have a brand. They know they have product that sells great, so they only need to figure out how do we get good in selling products online instead of offline. Had a blast at Adidas, 5 years, loved that. Took as many as opportunities within Adidas as possible. So did from content management to consumer experience to operations to customer service. Tried to get my fingers into everything that what was available, knowing that at some point I wanted to be head of e-commerce. And that is, if you work for a company like Adidas, at the size of Adidas, it's a pretty good school to learn how to do e-commerce.
And was that a turning point for you then? Because that was where you saw just how big the opportunity within digital commerce was, and that's why you wanted to step up into that head of e-com role.
So again, I was always interested in this entrepreneurial kind of things. I like to build stuff, and I like to see in the very end the numbers supporting that storyline. And in the very end, I had a lot of ideas as a teenager, and some of them worked out greatly, and I sold them on to other companies. Some ideas just didn't take off, and other ideas I was being sued on because I used some images that I was not supposed to use on the website. So I like this entrepreneurial thinking. And if you work in the digital area, I mean, you have the opportunity to build every week new stuff. You can trial your ideas. And I have friends who work for big automotive companies. And I would argue that would be for me the most boring job in my life, because unless you're working in Tesla, there's not a lot of change in those companies because they do the same thing for 100 years. I like the chaos. I like that it is muddy and dirty and sometimes frustrating, but that is exactly what I enjoy.
Okay. And so that Adidas was a turning point for you, and your focus was on getting to that director of e-commerce role, which you took before Bugaboo with another company, which is Denim. Is that right? Denim?
Exactly. Denham, the jean maker. It's a luxury brand selling, actually founded by Jason Denham, a British guy from Manchester, if I'm not mistaken. And they sell their premium jeans. So the price goes up to 700, 800 euros for a pair of jeans.
Wow.
And they're like handmade in Japan on traditional machinery, not industrial made stuff. And they also have cheaper jeans starting, I believe, at 130 euros. And that was a super cool opportunity because it enabled me to basically start from scratch, build my own team, being part of a much smaller organization, but I was forced to be involved in every aspect of the business because there was nobody. We started with 2 people in my team, fulfillment from the stores, and then we started hatching out a plan like how can you really grow the business. And I've been 3 years with the company, and every year we double conversion rate. So super exciting, when you start with 0.5% conversion rate A year later, you're at 1%. A year later, you're at 2%. And that is, again, at this price point, this takes a little bit of time and a little bit of energy to improve the conversion rate in that industry.
And it said you transitioned to SFCC in 9 weeks.
Yeah.
So that seems quick for an SFCC.
That was a record.
Wow. Okay.
That's it's a little bit tricky. So obviously, if you work for a small company, you don't have the budgets of a large company. So you know that you need to find a lot of loopholes to compete with the larger brands. But also you don't have a lot of the management overhead that you deal in with the last corporation. It was basically me and one of my team members who ran the entire show. And we took a million shortcuts, but both of us worked with Salesforce Commerce Cloud at Adidas. So we knew the system inside out. And due to me having so many different roles at Adidas, and I've been exposed to so many different sides of the business, I was feeling really, really confident and running this project at a very high speed. We picked a great agency, and they thought we were crazy, but they were themselves crazy enough to actually trust us and say, you know what, we're going to go with you on that journey. And you need to imagine that we had this super strict timeline where we would go into their office every on Tuesday evening. I needed to send them over the wireframes that I basically hand drawn on a piece of paper, and I just put like bullet points behind and said, okay, this is what we roughly need to build. We handed this over to their design team. They built it. So the next day already, we would review this, and then they started building. We would spend every day time in their office with their developers, literally sitting next to the developers. So in the moment they had a question, instead of sending out an email, waiting for the response, so I was just like, do it like this, do it like that, go ahead. Super fun project. Until today, multiple years later, I'm close friends with the project manager back in the days, and he's still saying that was one of the most fun, exciting, and crazy projects he's ever done.
I'm not surprised with those timescales, but it was successful from your point of view, the delivery of that.
Absolutely. It's and I went in there with the ambition that I wanted to be able, as a small brand, compete with large brands in terms of functionality and the stuff that we could do. And the way how we built this website was basically, I want to make sure that we had 3 things from a mindset in that. I wanted to have speed. So I wanted to be able to very quickly iterate the homepage, update the product detail pages, update the home pages. I wanted to have flexibility. So I wanted to be able that we have a different product experience for a jean than we have for a basic t-shirt than we have for a dress. I wanted to be able to scale things quickly up, meaning that if I want to change one product, I can do it. But if I need to change 1,000 products, I also want to be able to do that quickly. And that platform was like a Swiss knife. I mean, it was unbelievable, the stuff that we could do with it. And I literally had former colleagues of Adidas visit us because they look at our website and we're like, Thomas, we really want to learn from you guys how you guys have done it. And you need to imagine we basically really made the platform work for us in such a unique way. I mean, I knew if I would leave the company or my team member would leave the company for whatever reason, we would have a problem because it was tailored to the way how we work, to our experience, to our back-end systems. It was beautiful.
So you've from that point now, yes, you've realized where you want to get to, and you've taken that next step into denim, and finally to the point you're at now, which is Bugaboo, and you're at that role level you want to be at. 25 migrations, and obviously the one before with denim in 9 weeks. There's a lot that you've achieved in that time in the process of getting to where you wanted to be. So what I think would be really interesting to know is, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you have learned along the way that have helped you achieve that level of success?
it's funny. I think in your question, there's already part of the answer. So I'm really obsessed with learning. I always feel, and this is, I think this is not only true for the digital space. I actually think this is for whatever job you're doing, which is a white collar job. These days, you need to continuously learn. There's new technology coming. There's a new consumer behavior coming. There's tons of skills that you need to pick up for yourself on the soft skill side as well. The way how you manage your work, the way how you do project management, agile is something. And I think it's key, really key, to constantly quickly look at yourself and wonder like, hey, what should I pick up? And I'm not joking that every day I spend maybe 30 minutes reading an article, watching a video about something that I don't know enough about. I think absolutely crucial. And I think this is even going to become more relevant in the future as change is just becoming more and more. This is, especially within the digital space, not that technology is going to stop to evolve. It is, if so, it's just getting more and more. The second thing that I think is super crucial is the ability to really listen to what is happening. And this is not only, of course, I mean, listening in meetings, listening to your team members, listening to your boss, etc., but also listening to your consumer and what are their needs, but also listening to the industry. I think as a leader, you need to be super aware to what is happening around you and why things are happening and what is the driving force behind certain things. It is something that obviously only becomes relevant at a certain stage of your career. In the early days of Adidas, of course, I need to listen to my boss and I need to listen to my colleagues. But the decision and the work that I was doing was very short term. I think now at the level where I'm already thinking about next year, the year after, what are the kind of things that need to happen here? And you need to be very switched on and listen carefully to what is happening in the industry to make the right decision right now, because the decisions I'm making these days, before I see them in reality, 6 months to a year are going to pass. And that's always what I try to keep in mind. It's like, hey, today's decisions, are the crucial ones. They're about the future. And I need to make sure that I try to do the right ones. And therefore, I recommend highly listening to what is happening around you.
So you touched on technology change a bit in that when you're talking about learning and constantly staying abreast of changes in technology that impact what you do. And that obviously enables you to make those decisions. How, or not how, but what is in your view, the single biggest impact of the pandemic on digital commerce tech that you've seen?
Yeah, I think, and I think we need to look a little bit more differentiated at this question, because I don't think there has been a single thing that is really driving change. First of all, Corona has not brought out any new technology. The only thing that really happened is that potentially existing technology has been used more or differently. If I take a very concrete example here from Amsterdam, food grocery industry went through massive change during Corona. When Corona started, yes, you could order your groceries from the big supermarket and that would be delivered the next day. And we were already quite used to that as well. But obviously during COVID, that behavior suddenly went 10 times up. There was a lot of more demand there. And you did see that a lot of those companies that had applications were suddenly investing a lot of more time into updating the applications. If I look, if I compare the user interface of some of the local retailers here in Amsterdam, how that has changed over the period, you have seen that has changed quite dramatically. And some of that was like, oh, we have more people using it. But also they were suddenly coming into painful decisions like delivery of certain items, toilet paper, a lot more difficult. So you need to think about the messaging on the website. You need to think about that they suddenly opened more categories, consumer behaving where we're changing more dramatically. I also saw suddenly we had this race of the grocery delivery services that deliver within 10 minutes. Literally a few months ago, there was one company, startup from Berlin, that came over to Amsterdam, delivery within 10 minutes. I was like, oh, that's interesting. A few months later, I think we have 6 or 7 companies right now competing in Amsterdam with the same proposition, delivery within 10 minutes. And obviously, if I look at my own behavior, suddenly that iPhone is my trusted advisor in buying groceries. But you also see, and I find it super interesting, if you do small shopping on the iPhone, it's super convenient doing it, because like, I just need some milk and some eggs so that I can have the dinner. But if I want to do big shopping of a big shopping bag, I always go back to my desktop computer, because shopping through a large supermarket assortment where you have 20 choices of eggs and 20 choices of pasta, etc., it's not convenient doing it on a mobile device. It's just, the real estate is too small, the interface is too clunky to get it done. And what I also find interesting is how fast a lot of those changes are now being reversed. And speaking about sample size of myself, sample size 1, so there's not a big sample size, but it is funny how some of the behaviors is already changing now again. I mean, we would buy dinner via Uber Eats and Deliveroo like 3 to 4 times a week, because it was very relaxing to buy nice food online and would, in the mental state where you couldn't leave home. That was very normal. And now you see all the restaurants are opening again. People are eating outside again. And I see literally less cyclists on the streets with the big backpacks from those companies. So technology-wise, I think it's a little bit like it went from one extreme, and we're not back at the other extreme. But it is super interesting to see how suddenly you saw some things being used heavily. And now we're slowly seeing them, returning back to normal, or whatever normal means, state.
Yeah. So really, it hasn't fundamentally changed or brought out new tech. It's just the utilization of existing tech better or more regularly, effectively.
Exactly. Because I also, I'm a nerd and I love technology. So what I'm going to say sometimes is a little bit fascinating for people, but if you look at the adoption rate of new technology, I mean, it still takes time. And people get so excited by, let's do more AI, let's do more, there's a new JavaScript framework that is so brilliant, we need to start using it. And I tend to be very German negative with this kind of stuff, where I'm like, let's wait a little bit and let's see when this is really being adopted. And it is super fascinating I see it like, Germany was the Netherlands. Here in the Netherlands, you see a lot of Apple Pay. Right? You see a lot of people at the supermarket using their phone to pay. If you go back to Germany, it is not being used. Like people yes, you can use it, but consumers are not using it, because Germany is very risk averse, and they're like, "Ooh, Apple Pay, is it really safe?" and this kind of stuff. So they're a lot more nervous about it. Yet here in the Netherlands, completely different adoption. And in Germany, actually, it has helped, because COVID-19, a lot of companies, retailers started to say, we prefer touchless payments instead of paying by cash. And that is suddenly where you saw a lot of more terminals popping up in stores where you usually would not see them. So that is maybe one of the things that I was surprised that finally the Germans might be slowly adopting more touchless payment methods.
Okay,
but it is slow.
I have noticed that with the German clients we've worked with and spoken to before, is they estimate roughly the digital commerce market in Germany is maybe 3 to 4 years behind the UK in terms of adoption of tech. And they're still focused in Germany, it seems, on growing out physical retail space. That forms quite a key central point in their growth plan as a retailer. So we're anticipating seeing that change over the course of the next 2 or 3 years.
And I mean, everywhere digital is growing. Also in Germany, it is growing. And I think there always have been, and this again, Germans tend to be quite risk averse. So just going to a random website and buy something, it is, and I'm really generalizing here. So apologies for all my fellow Germans that do love shopping online, but it's not in the nature of a lot of Germans. And obviously Corona has changed that also dramatically. I mean, like in many countries, you just saw going through the roof. And of course, there will be people who suddenly realize, you know what, I don't need to be afraid of it. It actually is working quite well. And again, I find it super interesting if you compare this to the Netherlands, just how different this is also in the Netherlands. The Netherlands makes it so much more convenient to do online shopping. It is a small country, so that is different to Germany, but it is basically even the small retailers have here a next day delivery proposition. A lot of them you can order at midnight and you still get it the next day. And it really makes you think a little bit like, well, I could, you're sitting in the evening on the couch and you're wondering, well, I could go out next day and get it. Or I just continue sitting on my couch, buy it right now, and then I don't need to worry about it. It is, the Germans will still need some time and some proper reasons to buy online.
Yeah, and we're doing more and more work outside of the UK, and a lot of that is in Germany. And I think we're starting to see the retailers gear up for those changes now. So there's been a few things that we've discussed that have been impacted by COVID. What does the future look like the next 12 to 18 months from your point of view, in your position as director of e-com at Bugaboo, but also outside of Bugaboo, specifically in the wider digital commerce sector? What does the next 12 to 18 months look like?
And I would argue we are already feeling it, but I think the number one thing is, and it's going to make you very happy, it is going to be the recruiting side of things. A lot of companies obviously scaled down recruiting and hiring during the pandemic because everybody needed to preserve cash. And for the last 6 months, we have really noticed how difficult it was to get employees into Bugaboo. And I'm hearing the same story from a lot of my colleagues at other companies and different industries. And I mean, it makes sense. Companies have been holding back with investment. There has been a shift toward digital, and the percentage will be higher. And there has been acceleration. We cannot say no to this. And maybe the acceleration was not as strong in fashion, maybe in some other industries, again, groceries as an example, where this really has been a massive acceleration. While fashion was already quite advanced. But now we need more talent. We need more people. We need to get better in recruiting. We need to be better in keeping our talent in spot, because that market, especially here in Amsterdam, is so competitive. In Amsterdam, you've got Tommy Hilfiger, Nike, Converse, Essex, Bestseller, large companies, super advanced what they do in e-commerce, exciting companies to work for on a large scale. And we all are searching for the same people. And we are a relatively small company compared to those to their size. So it's also for us difficult to compete with those companies because they have the deeper pockets.
So that is not unusual for us to hear. And I think this is something, like you say, you're already feeling, and this will go well into next year. The demand for those resources that everyone wants is just through the roof. So hiring is going to be absolutely key. And that will apply to Bugaboo specifically and the wider e-com community. From a technology point of view, is there anything that you see or you think will change, fundamentally change e-com over the course of the next 12 to 18 months?
There is something that I have been talking about, and I don't know whether I believe myself into it, but it is augmented reality.
Okay.
And it comes back to where is growth within the digital space coming? And again, fashion, consumers are used to buy fashion online. They're used to returning it. It's an easy business. But if you look at other industries like furniture, like cars, and even strollers, I think there might be a much bigger shift into consumers at least researching more online and finding that. And I've seen Apple pushing massively into augmented reality. And if you look at those prototypes where you can put a couch into your living room and it actually is scaling correctly, it actually looks decent. You can actually look around. I'm really surprised about the quality. And again, you cannot feel the couch. You don't know how it is to sit on the couch. So there's still a few things that personally I'm like, is that the same thing? But I do feel slowly that those industries might be really picking up on this because it makes it so much easier. And I've seen a prototype recently of a company that was doing posters that you can put on your wall, and they did an augmented reality thing. And it was just a prototype, and I was looking and I was like, that is pretty cool. I mean, we moved into this apartment a year ago, so our walls are still empty. And I was looking and I was like, that is pretty cool. I was really so surprised how much I enjoyed it. And I think it's going to take still a little bit more time until the technology is really adopted, until companies have started creating those 3D models. And we need to find the right application of those 3D models. But I have a feel this might be more into it than I want to admit officially.
Yeah, I think it's fair to assume that if Apple are investing that much time and money into AR, and they would have had to make these decisions 18 months, 2 years ago, arguably, that they recognize or they foresee these changes as well. So I think you're right. I've used it personally when we wanted to get a new front door on the house. It wasn't perfect by any means, but it gave you a rough idea of what it might look like. So I think it does certainly have an application. Okay, well, that was great. Thank you very much for kicking off season 2 of the FODcast. It was really good to.
There was a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely. It was really good to get some insight from you in terms of Bugaboo and the future of digital commerce. Well, that is episode 1. Season 2 of the podcast wrapped up. Really interesting chat with Thomas Stegelmann. Gave us some great insights into Bugaboo and how they're adapting over the course of the next 12 to 18 months and how COVID's impacted their business. I look forward to catching up with all of you for episode 2 shortly. Bye-bye.